All right, welcome to Halitics. So psyched to be with you today. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm also psyched to have my friend and compatriot in the progressive movement, Jared Schablein, with us today. Good day, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Hal. It's good to catch up. I know with all the work we do across the state, we don't always get to chat as much as I think either of us would like. So thanks for having me on.
I have been discussing anti Semitism and the reports of rising anti Semitism in the wake of the October 7 attack by Hamas and Israel's ongoing reprisals in Gaza. I'll be honest with you, I have been somewhat skeptical. I'm not necessarily buying all the reports that Jews are under attack. Both of us, by the way, are Jewish. And I saw that you had posted online in response to a pundit in Maryland that you yourself had, in fact, been subject to or had anti-Semitism, affect you, impact on you recently. So I really wanted you to discuss that in light of this report. We've got that there from Stand With Us. This is just over the weekend. I don't know, 199 plus bomb threats around the country. But you go where you like. If you want to talk more globally, fine. If you want to talk about your own experiences, I'd love to go there.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, and I'll get into this, some of my experiences with anti-Semitism actually has started before October 7th and isn't as tied into what's going on. It obviously, I believe, has a part into it, but isn't the main source of it. At least for me personally, I do know there's some other members on the Eastern Shore community that, perfect example, there's a Jewish delicatessen here, really big on the Eastern Shore, who has stated that for the first time ever, he's actually received anti-Semitic comments on his page, his ads for his deli, which has been really tough to see. And he's universally beloved in the community. Like really, when you go out to Ocean City, Rehoboth Beach, all these beach communities, you swing by his business and you get food. So that particular graphic that you just had on the screen, I actually saw from a Jewish friend of mine up in Cecil County. His synagogue was actually a victim of one of these bomb threats. So when I saw him posting about that, I wanted to do some research and look into it and say, is this something that was a broader thing that happened this weekend, or was this just something, unfortunately, that, happened just on the Eastern Shore? And then during that time, I found that graphic that kind of, displayed, just the basic information. It seems like there's been 17 states. I'm blanking on I thought it said 199. Yeah, 199 synagogues received bomb threats over the weekend. This has been something that unfortunately isn't new to the Jewish community. Obviously, with rising tensions, some of these ideologies kind of get thrust towards the forefront. But, Passovers, any really big Jewish holidays, there's always one or two, synagogues that unfortunately have to deal with, instances like this of, people just trying to cause chaos, cause fear, So that was really what kind of originally made me want to start talking about this. As I had a friend here on the Eastern Shore whose synagogue, did receive one of these bomb threats, and that really concerned me.
So this was a friend of yours whose synagogue received the threats, and you mentioned personal experience. You mentioned the deli in, I guess, Salisbury, Maryland, which is, I think, where you are. Maybe you've moved a bit since then, but that's sort of the southeastern corner of Maryland's Eastern Shore, if folks are familiar with that region. I think it's important for those who aren't familiar with the Maryland geography and specifically the Eastern Shore to understand this is a much more conservative area of the state. I think the percentage of Jews, correct me if I'm wrong, is much lower than it would be in, say, suburban Washington, D.C., where I live. And so my stereotype, my generalization of that area would be there might be more anti-Semitism than is found in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live. In fact, I've experienced none. I mean, I have to tell you, Jared, I don't feel any anti-Semitism. I don't feel any threats to me or my family because we're Jewish. It just isn't even remotely in my life. I'm assuming that may be a different story in other parts of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not an accurate, like, this is the exact percentage. I was actually talking with my rabbi in my synagogue a couple months ago on this before all this happened about, what do we think the percentage is? At most, probably about 2% of the population here on the lower shore is Jewish. Our congregants tend to be older. A lot of them tend to be transient as well. And what I mean by that is in the summertime when it's warm, they're here in Ocean City, Salisbury, the lower shore, and then when the winter hits, they will move to back to Arizona, North Carolina, Florida, places where it's a little warmer and the climate's a little kinder to folks. We do have some folks who have their roots here full time. There's also a synagogue in Salisbury. I do not go to that one. It's just a different affiliation than I am. So we are a small community. My real experience in anti-Semitism here on the shore tends to be more not so much around Israel because it is a more conservative area and people tend to be more pro-Israel than, I would say probably in Montgomery County and some of the bigger municipalities where there's more of a debate. I've come to the conclusion that when people tend to don't like me in politics or this happens at least once in an election when I'm working on a campaign.
Well, I mean, let me just interrupt you because in politics, everyone is disliked, right? I mean, everyone is loved and beloved by their voters, by their group, whoever supports them, and the other side hates them. And the more successful you are, the higher your profile rises, the more haters you're going to engender.
Oh, 100%. So one of the things I've kind of noticed that happens during elections, especially when it gets close to polls, election day, and the other campaign knows that they're losing, you'll start hearing people going on social media, even directly from the other campaigns, and being like, "Oh, Jared, he secretly controls these local politicians. He's secretly behind this event." I remember in 2019, I studied abroad for the first half of the year in the Czech Republic, which my thoughts are with the people of Prague. My university actually had a mass shooting there this morning in the Czech Republic. And
was that wasn't related to anti-Semitism?
No, it wasn't related to anti-Semitism, but it was actually just outside, down the street from the Jewish quarters. But my thoughts are with them, so I did want to. Sorry to jump off track, but I did want to.
No, in fact, I'm really interested in that. I mean, we have got a lot of other issues to discuss, so we'll have to leave Czechoslovakia, or I shouldn't say the Czech Republic, Czechia. What is it called there? Czechia
officially, but the people that live there still call it the Czech Republic. So, but So
you were just saying maybe some of the comments about you reflect anti-Semitic stereotypes, Jewish people behind the scenes controlling, pulling the strings, controlling politicians, that kind of thing.
Yeah, things like also, people have said like, "Oh, I'm only interested in money. I'm all money driven." Like an exact quote, like Jared is just greedy. He's only doing this for money. He secretly controls, the area, which I always like to joke when this gets brought up because people bring it to me and I'm like, so the win rate for the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus, which is the organization I chair, is about 71%. If I really controlled everything, don't you think our win rate would have been a little higher than 70%? So that's the joke I like to throw out.
Well, I mean, you've definitely, I mean, I've watched you for a while now, Jared, and there's no question you've had a lot of success, and really with a very small group to begin with of committed progressive activists in a very conservative area of the state, you've really built something that to last, with connections to influential leaders and politicians throughout the state, including U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen and many others. So I maybe some people are a little jealous, or they do. I mean, I certainly isn't because you're Jewish, but maybe, people say, well, how did he do that? And they're ascribing some nefarious conspiracy rather than just hard work and intelligence to your success.
I think that could be part of it to an extent, but I also think kind of some of the wording and what they've chose definitely has connotations that some of the other members of my organization and our group who are just as influential as me making sure we get the success and put in the hard work. As you know, it's not a one-man band out here by any stretch of the imagination. Don't kind of get some of those same criticisms. But you're right. The other thing I'd like to kind of tell people, because I do get asked quite a bit in a non-hateful context of, you've built these connections, you built this organization. How do you do this? I've noticed it's incredibly easy to get elected officials to engage with you. Perfect example of this: when we first got started, when we first engaged with Chris Van Hollen, we reached out to his staff, his Eastern Shore staff, and was like, "Hey, we have a house party of about 20 people. They want to sit down and talk with the senator. We got this progressive organization, and you know the process. How you've been involved in politics. The staff goes to the politician, they talk to the scheduler. You get on the job. And I'll never forget how many times I've talked to elected leaders in the state where they're just so excited to hear that there's a progressive organization in the state. So they're like, "Yeah, of course we'll come out. We want to see." It's kind of like a novelty because in Montgomery County, like, being progressive isn't like, no one's shocked to hear there's progressive organizations in Montgomery County. But when you hear, hey, there's a progressive organization that in Wacomico County, a lot of people is, kind of like, I had no idea there were even, people on the left out there. So
yeah, no, it's a man bites dog kind of story a little bit. When you hear from a self-identified and progressive who has the chops to show they really are working for I think, for workers, for poor, struggling, and middle class Marylanders, and so that is pretty awesome. So I appreciate that. I do want to focus a little bit on the Jewish story, the anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
I do note, like, in terms of people maybe using Jewish tropes and the like, or anti-Semitic tropes, I didn't know you were Jewish. I mean, I had no idea. I don't know if Schablein didn't sound to me like a Jewish name to the extent that I thought about it. And so are you confident that you're well known as a Jewish person, or is it possible? And I'm not trying to cast doubt at all, Jared, on your experiences, but I'm just wondering if you think it's possible people may say things that sound like they could be based on your being Jewish, but they don't even know you're Jewish.
So statewide, no, I don't feel. I feel like it's just kind of becoming more and more known. Locally, yes, but a lot of folks on the Western Shore, especially this year, have been kind of shocked. Actually, interestingly enough, you mentioned that one of the things when I started being more open about my faith and was posting about it more and letting folks know I'm going to synagogue, I had a former friend who was like, "Oh, the only reason Jared's being Jewish and tying into his roots is he wants to say he's oppressed, and he's not really Jewish. He doesn't look Jewish." And so it's even stuff like that. Because you're right. When you look at me right away, unless I have a yarmulke on and I'm walking out of a synagogue, I don't fit the stereotypic ideal.
You played football, right? I mean,
I did play football. So
I can only say that because I'm Jewish. Otherwise, it's like the Seinfeld episode where the guy converts to being Jewish so he can tell Jewish jokes. But I wasn't shocked. I wasn't like, oh my God, Jared's Jewish. Who knew? But, given where you live, given your name, your appearance, I think a lot of people didn't know or wouldn't have thought of you as being Jewish. So I wonder if remarks that could sound anti-Semitic maybe were made by people who were ignorant of your faith. That was my question, really. And you're saying there's a chance, but it's probably a small one now because you've become more out as a Jew. Not that you were hiding it, but you're more upfront that that's your religion.
Correct. Yes. A lot of the blogs and a lot of the folks that have made these comments have been have well known and have made that kind of a point. But no, I think it's interestingly real fast is so my last name actually did have a different spelling that was changed when we immigrated over. So both sides of my family are Jewish. My mother's side of the family was Jewish but converted to Christianity before immigrating to Somerset County here on the Eastern Shore in the 1660s. My father's side, my grandfather and great-grandmother were Jewish and converted to Catholicism. I converted back. So my family is both on my father's side's about like my father's half Jewish, half Italian, from New York too. So it makes it just perfect. Like, when you think of New York and some of the influential communities and, big communities, and you think of the Jewish community, you think of the Italian community. My family combined the two of them, which really makes some interesting cultural and family gatherings, because you kind of get elements from both. My father was raised Catholic, but isn't practicing, and during the course of my life, I kind of got reconnected to my Jewish roots and came back. So that also can probably be used as one of the things that's kind of shocking to people, because I do have a very interesting story with my faith and my family's faith. One of the big reasons my grandfather converted was he wanted to marry my Italian grandmother, who was Catholic, and why he was alive, he did not talk about it very much, and I kind of kept it, I wouldn't say a secret, but I didn't exactly bring it up, because that could have been a real point of contention in my family. So when people are like, you don't look Jewish, I mean, to an extent, there kind of was a reason for that, but not the reason you thought. Just
Yeah, I try not to ever say that, because Jews come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. So
yeah.
I just really try to avoid that. There is a certain stereotype look, especially for Ashkenazi Jews. But again, I try really hard not to go there. Jared Schablein with us. He's, you can see, it says it right on your screen, Maryland, a progressive leader. And we're talking about anti-Semitism he's experienced and around the country. And it's going to get maybe a little bit contentious, or maybe not. I really am not certain how Jared will respond to some of my questions and points. But if you want to join us at any time, please do so. 240-242-5646. And don't forget to click subscribe, bottom right corner of your screen, and like. And if you don't like it, you can still click like. There's no one's going to give you a shock because you're breaking some code by clicking like when you dislike. But if you don't like it, don't click like. But let me know. Text me, email what your problem is, as Jeff so often does, which I, again, always appreciate, Jeff, your comments. So, Jared, let's get into it. 400 Jewish facilities. This is from CNN. I read this. I mentioned I've been somewhat skeptical of some claims of anti-Semitism. I think there are two reasons that I think we may be seeing a rise, or three reasons. One, there is legitimate increase in anti-Semitism, but it's tied to Israeli actions, which I think are reprehensible. And I think we as Jews in the community have a duty to speak out against what Israel is doing right now. But that said, Jewish people shouldn't be blamed for what Israel is doing. Unfortunately, we are often. And that's also partly Israel's fault, because Israel says, if you criticize us, you're criticizing Jews. So I have a problem with that. I do have a problem, of course, with anyone who expresses phobia against Jewish people, fear, threatening behavior. But I also do think that what we sometimes see are people claiming victim status when they're not, to distract from what their co-religionists are doing. And that really upsets me. So I think those are all wrapped up in this ball of wax. And we see from this story the 400 Jewish facilities received false bomb threats. So many of those threats are, I guess they're called swatting, which I never even knew what that meant. But we don't know who calls, right? I mean, it could be someone from the congregation who's calling, so that the congregation can claim, look, we're under attack, we need protection, we're being threatened, we all need to stand together, including with Israel. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I can't necessarily assume, I will not assume necessarily that these bomb threats are being made by people who hate Jews.
I mean, I don't really interesting. I mean, when it comes to standing with Israel, especially in this country, I don't think you would need to do that. I mean, there's already very powerful and influential organizations and groups that support Israel. Perfect example, on the Eastern Shore, which is a little different than the rest of the state. I mean, a lot of folks, when they think of Maryland, they're like, oh, that's a Catholic colony, a lot of, a big Catholic state. The Eastern Shore is a majority Protestant, which tends to be very, very evangelical Protestant, which tends to be incredibly pro-Israel as it is. I know a lot of the countries, the South, pretty much every Republican stronghold in the country tends to be more Protestant, more evangelicals. I know there's exceptions to the rule. If you were looking to build support and say that's your end goal, I don't think calling a bomb threat is on yourself would be the way of doing it. Fortunately, police departments around the world, because when you do make a call like that, there's going to be a considerable amount of resources being put in, on the trucks, police, bomb squad, they're going in prepared. They tend to be very good at tracking these people down and finding out who did it. Kind of the pivot to one of the other points you made. I mean, you're absolutely right. I feel like these are definitely increasing because of what's going on with the Israeli-Palestine conflict. But as you kind of mentioned, it is completely unfair and in itself a trope to target Jews because of what Israel is doing. Like, you and I were Jewish, but we're not Israeli. But
let me interrupt. I think that's true. But don't you think, though, that Jewish people, not all of us, but some of us, play into the hands of anti-Semites by equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism?
I mean, yeah, I think to be frank, we put out a statement this week criticizing the far-right government of Israel. I don't think it's inherently anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. I think it depends the context and what's being said. But no, I do think that's kind of a dangerous line of thinking. I think the far-right government of Benjamin Netanyahu has made Jews less safe around the world and has made Jews less safe in Israel. Like, you're not going to hear me defend that government. I'm really excited to see some of the polling. On Twitter, I actually follow a page called Israel Elects, which literally just handles polling and data about what are Israelis thinking, where are they thinking of voting the next election. And I'm glad to see that not only a majority of Israelis want a election after this war, but are overwhelmingly against Benjamin Netanyahu and his party. So my hope is, and this is something that I assume we're probably going to get into conversations of peace at some point today. That far-right government is going to have to be out of power for that to happen, and is an obstacle to peace. So, long story short, no, I don't think inherently.
Well, let's get to that. I don't want to monopolize or stay with any specific focus on a broader topic of anti-Semitism and Israel's actions. But I did put this on screen. This is actually a photo that's taken within a half mile or half a mile at the most from my house. This is the sign that a synagogue had posted on their front lawn, and it was defaced with those X's. And do you see that as an inherently anti-Semitic act?
On a synagogue, I mean, you're getting into an interesting area there. It's also, let me approach it from a different angle. Let's say your ideology here is you disagree with what Israel's doing. You don't want to stand with Israel. You find what they're doing reprehensible. What does doing this accomplish? What does defacing that sign accomplish? It doesn't help the Palestinians. It doesn't help change public opinion in the way that you're trying to do it.
Let me push back on that, Jared. I'm going to push back on that. I actually think there is value in defacing that sign to the people who actually, and I'm not a big believer in, trigger warnings and all that stuff, but I think for Palestinians and Gazans, especially people who have loved ones in Palestine or Gaza, that Israeli flag is akin to a Nazi flag. I do not think there's a difference. And to them, that they look at that flag the way Jews look at a swastika. And I think with good reason. It's understandable to me why they would feel that way. So when they see that sign, and we have plenty of Muslims I shouldn't equate Muslim with Arab either, because obviously they're not the same. But to the extent that there are Arabs, Palestinians in the region who drive by that sign, I think they're probably angry, upset, stressed out just by seeing it. And yes, I think it does give them a little bit of a sense, well, we're not totally alone.
Sure, and it's also one of those things, and here's what makes this conflict so difficult. I mean, there's plenty, as you kind of mentioned, probably one of the feelings of this congregation that put up the sign. There's a lot of congregations that feel, whether they're right or wrong, that's a matter of opinion, that would say the same thing about a Palestinian flag, who see videos online of Palestinians. I actually saw a video today, a couple minutes beforehand, posted by one of the Czech newspapers I watched, that was just interviewing people in the West Bank, and it was asking them, do you support Russia or Ukraine? And their answer was, oh, I support Russia because Ukraine has a Jewish president. I feel like the big issue with this conflict, and I feel like this is something that gets overlooked, and especially in the conversation in the U.S., because this is a very complicated issue, is you have radicals on both sides who are like, I'm Israel, we're going to destroy Palestine, we're going to take all the land, we're going to get rid of these people. Then you have a section of the the pro, I don't even want to call them pro-Palestine, because that's not what the average Palestinian wants, especially Muslim groups, Palestinian groups. The average person doesn't want this, who are like, yeah, we're going to destroy the state of Israel and, push everyone out. That's kind of been the issue since this conflict has started. In reality, the only path forward, Israel's been around long enough that there are people there who have been born there, who have lived there for 3-4 generations now. You have people in the Palestinians that have been there. The only solution, at least I see moving forward, is going to be, number one, getting the far-right government out of power in Israel and getting rid of the far-right, ultra-religious, well, both sides, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Netanyahu and his party, are far-right, hyper-Orthodox, extreme versions of their faith. I don't think anyone would push back on that point. Until those factions are removed and more moderates take over, which are more reflective of the populations, you're not going to really see peace. And I think you're going to continue to see instances where both symbols and people and everything to do with the other side is going to be viewed as this extreme, this evil that has to be destroyed. I feel like, and I know it's incredibly difficult. A lot of people have lost their life. A lot of people have changed, had life-altering things. We're going to have to work to a point, and this is why I wish a country like the United States has been more neutral in this conflict, where we could mediate, where the other side doesn't view the other side as the worst evil on the face of the earth that has to be eradicated. Whether that be how some Palestinians, Arab, Muslims, whoever it is, view the state of Israel, and those who might see Jewish people in that same light, and then again, the Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, whatever group that is unfairly being punished collectively because of Hamas. So
Jared, I want to just thank you again so much for joining me. We've got another half hour if you can stick with me. I know you're busy.
Yeah, you stuck with me till 1, unfortunately.
That's awesome. So that's great. And by the way, anyone want to chime in, please, 240-242-5646. I want to show off to Jared how I've got the system set up so we can actually talk to him on the Google Meet, and then we can get calls and see slides. So you got to help me out to pat myself on the back there by a call. Jared, so much to what you said. We also have to get to Joe Biden's approval rating. You mentioned Netanyahu's is in the toilet. Biden's isn't in the toilet, but it's kind of circling the bowl.
It's getting close, yeah.
Especially among younger voters such as yourself. I do want to get to that. I think it's connected, by the way, no question, to what we're talking about now. But I do want to just get to what I believe Jewish Americans should do, and I certainly want your take to try to tamp down anti-Semitism. And I want to just show, this is a photo. This is not, the reason I'm showing this picture is because this came right from the Temple Emmanuel website. That is the temple, the synagogue that we saw the defaced sign. It was in front of the congregation that, from this photo, and I think it's also in my community, Kensington, Maryland, where they were protesting for Black lives. So this is obviously a progressive a community. And I'm just going to show, and this is also, I want to show another image from their website. Let's see if we can see it. I'm going to have to kind of put my oval out so you can see it. So this is also right on their website, Together with Israel, resources for the crisis in Israel. I'm going to get your response. I'm going to talk for another moment. So you saw the Black Lives Matter. You see what they're also promoting, Together with Israel. What if they had this up? What if they were out there with a sign that said Palestinian lives matter. In other words, they're looking beyond their parochial sectarian group, their co-religions, and saying, wait a sec, we have a duty that's even more important because we're Jewish to say to the Jewish state, the so-called, the self-defined Jewish state, no, you can't kill Palestinians willy-nilly the way you're doing it. We will say no. Just as we wish as Jews that 80 years ago, the Germans had been able to summon the good, quote, good Germans, unquote, had been able to summon the will to stand up to the Nazis. What if instead of saying together with Israel, they had a sign that said together with Palestine, resources for the crisis in Palestine? Because the crisis in Palestine is far greater, far more serious. It's a humanitarian crisis the world has never before seen. It's that bad in Palestine right now because of what Israel's doing. So isn't it the duty of Jews not just to say remain neutral or to wring their hands or to say, well, we don't like what Israel's doing, to actually say no. What Israel, and as Jews, as wealthy, because we're a wealthy, affluent community, obviously, who have influence over this country, to say no, you must stop. You must stop right now. Isn't that what we should be doing?
Well, for example, one of the things that the organization I chaired, the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus, did, and we took a couple weeks to do this. The statement actually came out last week. We got together folks from the Jewish community, folks from the Muslim, Palestinian community, our communications committee, our leadership, pretty much anyone who was interested. And we sat down and we were like, okay, this is a conflict that is incredibly complicated. There's a lot of issues here that both sides feel like their issues aren't being heard. So one of the big things we want to do is we didn't want to really make a cut. Like, we wanted to obviously support a ceasefire, and that's what we did. And we wanted to highlight the loss that people were dealing with and the pain. But we also wanted to give a very complex issue the complexity it deserves. So I was thinking, because you mentioned to me last night and I didn't get a chance to do it because I was apartment hunting, anything that I wanted to send you, but I wish I sent you the LSP statement that we have up on our Facebook, because if you look at, and folks can see it on our Facebook, Instagram, just type in lowershoreprogressivecaucus.com a couple of days ago. One of the things we did was not only did we call for a ceasefire, but we kind of talked through the issues of what needed to be addressed. Obviously, we need to address things like illegal settlements. That's a huge point of contention. If we're going to have a peace settlement, you're going to have to respect the borders of the other side. Pro-Israeli groups love to talk about, giving land for peace. That's what Israel has done with several of its neighbors. We gave up land for peace. Okay, well, then that seems like that needs to be done here for these settlements. The other thing is making sure humanitarian aid is getting in, so the people of Gaza aren't dealing with, starvation, lack of medicine, like basic human necessities. I think ultimately, yes, the Jewish communities need to be more willing to understand the plight of the Palestinians. But I feel like in general, because you're right, a lot of communities were wrapped up in, what happened. And October 7th was a horrible day for the Jewish community, not only in Israel, but around the world. It was a scary time. This entire conflict has been incredibly scary. Antisemitism has skyrocketed. Also, for our Muslim brothers and sisters, Islamophobia has skyrocketed. There was a Palestinian boy up in Vermont, if I remember correctly, who was he shot? Was he stabbed? He was brutally attacked over this.
There were three men or young men, adolescents. Maybe you're thinking of a different event. Maybe involved with the University of Vermont, who were attacked in Burlington. So I don't know if that's the same.
Yeah, that's what it was. And it's just one of those things where I feel like we need to look at the full picture, and we need to be willing to address all of the issues that, if we're truly committed to the idea of peace and making sure this stops, which I'd like to hope that we are, we need to understand, and I know, so the Jewish community tends to be like, of course, Israel deserves to be in safety and prosperity and have its borders and rights. We also need to be willing to recognize that Palestine needs to be able to have safety, security in its borders, and vice versa. the idea that one side is eventually going to be able to destroy the other, and it was, I don't want to say it was funny, but it was fitting. The Onion did a piece a couple years ago where it was the Onion News conflict, breaking down the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and in the first like 30 seconds of the video, it talks about, and this is obviously dark humor, so I apologize if this offends anyone, how the conflict is both sides truly believe that they're eventually going to eradicate the other, and then it never happens, and that's why this is just a never-ending conflict. I feel like we kind of have to get out of that tribalism, that mindset, understand both, yes, our group's concerns, but also understand the plight and concern of the others. Because when I took a course on this in college, we had to write our own peace plans. That was like the final paper. And I remember specifically starting my paper with, "This is the dumbest conflict in human history," just because how simple it would be to solve if we could just look at the bigger picture.
So, Jared, a lot of really good food for thought. I did get your statement up. I believe this is it.
Yeah, that is correct.
Let me see if I can get the whole thing on the screen for folks. Yeah, no, I'm sorry you didn't bring it to my attention earlier, but I'm glad you just mentioned it. We can play around with the internet a little bit. And I did, yeah, I really try to be fair to everyone and let them make their case, including with any documentation. And Jared, you're making very powerful, I think, brief for what I've been saying too, is we need these groups to come together and work for some kind of true justice for all and peace. And I think where maybe we disagree a little bit is I view Israel as the main both aggressor and also mostly responsible. I understand whatever you say about Hamas, they still are the representing the persecuted people, the people with very little freedom of movement. And Israel is the reason for that. And we as Americans and Jews, I think, have a special duty to try to push back against what Israel's doing. And I don't, and Joe Biden isn't doing that. Let's Joe Biden and the Jewish community in this country, I don't believe we're facing a moral crisis, and too many of us are blinking, including our leaders.
I mean, I think that's a fair point to raise. I mean, I think there's been a couple foreign policy blunders in the Joe Biden administration, and you know me as someone who has been relatively supportive of the president, but I'm not going to sit here and deny and be like, yeah, no, he's handled this greatly. Like, no, 10 out of 10, no notes. I don't think anyone that's acting in good faith can say that. Yeah, it's just one of those things where I think you're correct in the fact that Israel definitely, because they are a much stronger state, I would probably say they probably are a regional hegemon, like probably one of the, if not the most powerful country in the region, pretty close. I mean, they're nuclear power, they have a very strong military, they have an experienced military in conflict. Like, it's not exactly a fair fight by any stretch of the imagination. So I do think that comes with, knowing that and needing to have a government in place that can show restraint. But also in the same breath, I'm not going to let Hamas off the hook. Hamas is a extreme organization that believes in killing Jews. They discriminate against the LGBTQ community. They discriminate against the Christian minority. They practice, in my opinion, what I believe is an extreme misinterpretation of Islam. Because, even here on the Eastern Shore, and, I would like to think Jewish communities around the country, Judaism and Islam have a long history together. During Jewish persecution in Christian Europe, where was it that the Jews typically fled to and had better lives? It was the Muslim world. So it's one of those things where this is what makes it so heartbreaking, is they try and pin this as, a Jewish versus Muslim issue, and kind of going back to my point of being the dumbest conflict in human history. Of there is so much of a history of Jews and Muslims living together in peace and harmony that I feel like that is what we have lost sight of. I feel like that's what we need to get back to. I feel like that is what we're going to need to get just as important as making statements saying, hey, we need humanitarian aid, we need to stop the conflict. I think one of the big things is we need to start getting Jewish and Muslim communities and leaders together again, doing events together, having an understanding. It is very hard, in my opinion and in my experience, to have a conflict with someone that you've broken bread with, that you know and you understand what they're going through. The more that you know a person, and a group, the harder it is to be ignorant and discriminatory towards that group. That has always been my experience. If you've noticed something different, please let me know. I'm going
to ask people at that point. Yeah, do call in. I would love to talk to one or two people in addition to Jared today. So 240-242-5646. I mentioned yesterday, by the way, that this is my last week in 2023 live streaming. I'll be off next week, and I'll be off the 1st, and then I'll be back. So if you want to talk to me this year, this is going to be your second to last opportunity, along with tomorrow. Jared, do you have anything else you want to add? Any kind of solutions or what you think folks can do, you'd like them to do in response to both the rising number of reports of anti-Semitism as well as trying to address the humanitarian crisis in the Holy Land?
So yeah, there's really two main things. I think there are plenty of organizations out there that are, legitimately trying to get resources into Gaza and address the victims of, who are feeling the brunt of this conflict. I think the important thing to remember about this conflict is that these are people that are having their lives drastically turned upside down, losing family members, dealing with bombing, dealing with the constant issue of, is today my community going to be bombed? Am I going to lose loved ones? That is a stress and, frankly, a hell that fortunately we here in the United States have never experienced. And God willing, I hope we never have to experience that. The other side of it is, I think, continuing to push for dealing with, anti-Semitism and the rise of Islamophobia.
Yeah. So your people's lives in the Middle East, especially, obviously, are just being ripped apart. And although my focus has been almost completely on Gazans, that does not negate the experience of the families who lost loved ones on October 7, or whose loved ones are now being held hostage. So this is really a terrible crisis in that region.
And that's something that's made it so difficult, because for me, it's been incredibly difficult since October 7th. And this is something that's kind of been in the back of my mind constantly, is that very point. Like, yeah, we can, I feel like that kind of gets lost in the politics, as you have people that have the loved ones who have, been killed. You've had people who have had loved ones who have been, bombed and we'll never see them again. You have people currently who are being held hostage where you don't know if it's like, are they alive? Are they hurt? What has happened to them? I feel like those are the people, the most immediate impact we can make right now, other than calling for a ceasefire, is actually, if you have, I know it's, I know for a lot of folks at home, it's the Christmas season, so I know a lot of money is going towards there. I know we just got past Hanukkah, New Year's coming up. This is the time of year where it's like, oh boy, someone else asking for money. If there's any opportunity, old blankets, food, non-perishable food, financial support, if you can give it, there are things that we can do, because unfortunately, there's always seems to be a shortage of humanitarian aid. So the more that we can do, the better for these folks. And I think the other aspects of that, and this is something that we look to do, we had some communications with some organizations. And ironically enough, I reached out to Senator Cardin's office on this before he announced he retired last year, was just doing a town hall to talk about anti-Semitism and just educate the community. This is what Judaism is. This is what we believe. This is who we are. Because I know it's a little bit different in like some of the bigger cities, like counties like Montgomery County, where there is a higher Jewish population, where the chances are, the non-Jewish person has probably dealt with someone who is Muslim or met someone who's Muslim or Jewish before. Here on the Eastern Shore, because we're such a small population, a lot of people, either I'm the only Jewish person they know, or they've never met a Jewish person before.
So Jared, that's really good stuff. Thank you. You are a political animal. I put this up because you are very involved in progressive Democratic circles and progressive Democratic politics. You see the polls that we're all seeing, including this latest report that suggests that Trump may actually be getting more younger votes now than Biden. I have trouble believing that for a variety of reasons, but even if it's not true, the difference is way too close. So, and I don't support Biden. I'm not voting for Biden. We write clear right now. But if it's the choice is between the two of them, it is Joe Biden's not going to win if half of the voters under 35 are going to vote for Trump. So, are you seeing numbers? Are you seeing that kind of hemorrhaging of support for Biden from young voters? A, and B, what's going on here? Why is this happening?
So my concern isn't necessarily that young voters are going to overwhelmingly come out for Trump. There was another poll, I believe it was Quantic. What's the one that starts with a Q? They were posting University of Michigan voter. He's a pollster from Michigan who's on Twitter, posted about it. Isn't necessarily that the young voters are going to go to Trump. My concern is my generation just isn't going to vote at all or leave that part of the ballot blank, which is obviously huge for the presidential election because Biden needs that coalition of young people. It's also going to hurt progressives down ballot who are running for school board, county council, Congress, if young people aren't showing up because they're upset with the president. Look, I mean, there's a lot to be frustrated about of how the U.S. has handled this conflict. Not only just President Biden, but
do you think? And you know, I have the slide there. It says poll finds wide disapproval of Biden on Gaza, and there's no question that's hurting him among younger voters, especially.
Of course.
But do you think that's the main factor or the sole factor? And I'll give you, rather than just making it totally open ended. I don't think, from what I've heard, Biden's done himself any favors with younger voters when it comes to the student debt crisis. Even though he has spoken of it, he has tried to, I guess, alleviate the pain for some. There's, I think, a general sense that he didn't do nearly as much as he could have, and the payments have recommenced. So maybe you can touch on that or other issues as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a compounding thing. Like, this is the issue of what's going on in Gaza, in the Middle East doesn't help. But like you said, it's student debt. It's a lot of these other issues. So I actually posted about this yesterday. One of the things that I'm hoping that he can kind of, it's better late than never, kind of strengthen and improve some of his policy on how this conflict has been being handled. But I was looking at something, and I have to hand it out to AOC and a lot of progressive leaders who have been pushing for this, the Climate Civilian Corps. That just got announced that 500,000 people have been young people have signed up across the country for that. They're going to be doing town halls on information on how to, get more involved in that. I actually signed up for one in January, and they're working on getting the final funding for it, where I feel like if he wants to improve his stance with younger voters, it's doing stuff like that, funding a program that, and you know me, Hal, I'm someone who my main goal is to get as many progressives elected and highlight the progressive movement and get our agenda done. I don't care who it is that we work with to get it done. I will say in this particular instant, I am very happy that President Biden is working with progressive leaders to get the CCC done and up and running. I think that's going to be huge in fighting climate change. I think it's going to give an opportunity to my generation to not only do something good in terms of community investment and something good for our country, but these are also going to be good paying jobs. Back to the original question, I did want to highlight that because I'm glad you did. And I kind of feel remiss because I saw your post on that very issue, Jared, on Facebook, I believe. And I meant to add it, right? I meant to so I would have been able to put that on screen when you were talking, but about the Climate Civilian Corps, but I neglected to do that. But you spoke about it eloquently, so I think we're good in that area. Let me throw this at you though, and this is something I heard on the Hill Rising, one of my competitors in the YouTube live stream world, although I think they're way ahead of me.
that Biden, you can point to some good things that Joe Biden has done, just as, for example, Paul Krugman, I don't know if you read him in the New York Times, can point to a lot of positive, numbers in the economy. But for so many, especially not necessarily young people, many young people, millions of young people, but working class and middle class, not upper middle class, not affluent or bougie, whatever. I hate that word, but whatever. People who are professionals who are making a good living, but folks who maybe have a small business, work in a factory job of some sort. This feels like nibbling around the edges. It doesn't get to the core issue that they see, which is a fundamentally unjust society where the haves keep getting more and more and everyone else is fighting for crumbs. So that's kind of my sense, but I want your response to that.
No, I think you bring up a very good point. I feel like in terms of messaging from as a party and President Biden's campaign of like, look, yes, there's been some good things that have happened, but we do live in a society where we have a lot of greed, and like inflation's been driven by corporate greed. I don't think anyone will argue against you on that point unless they're, a Republican in Congress being paid by these corporations with campaign contributions. I think we need to address people where they're at. Like the new Alice report in Wacomico County shows we're creeping up to 50% of people that live in poverty, and why things have gotten better economically, better for who? And I think especially progressives, because this is who we are, but I hope, other Democrats, because as you know, I am a Democrat. I do plan on supporting President Biden in 2024, would kind of latch on and take from us is we need to meet people where they're at and be honest. Yes, the economy is good. We avoided a recession. However, now we need to work on a crucial impact of poverty. We need to work on inflation. We need to work on these issues instead of just being like, no, it's not really an issue. It's fine. Numbers are good. I think we need to deliver programs that give people good paying union jobs, that give people the opportunity to go seek a higher education, to make sure that everyone has health insurance. It's not like people haven't told us what they want. It's not like we don't know what the issues are. I think we just need to be bolder like the party used to do. As the progressive movement and as my grandfather who, on my mother's side, who passed away a couple years ago, he grew up on the Eastern Shore.
I think I remember that, Jared, because I think you posted about that.
Yeah, how he collected
died,
all of my old articles. So he grew up, he was a New Deal Democrat. Like the New Deal saved his life. And I feel like we need, as a party, our movement has stemmed from that. But as a Democratic Party, I think we need to return to the New Deal, where we're investing in government programs that give people the opportunity to not only improve our country, but have a good paying job, like the climate civilian climate corps. We need to finally finish after 100 years and pass Medicare for all and have universal health care. We need to make sure people have livable wages. I give Wes more credit for speeding up the minimum wage for $15 an hour. However, it is very unfortunate, and I hope he will continue the fight to index it to inflation. So instead of every 7 years, we have to raise it $10. It slowly goes up a couple cents a year with inflation. I think this is something that we just need to return to our roots and get bold on economic policy. And then when we come to foreign policy, we need to have humility, humanity, and we need to be willing to do the right thing, not always the convenient thing.
Jared, I'll interrupt you again, but I really enjoy this conversation and getting to know you a little better politically. I mean, we've often talked, but I feel like I've got a much better understanding of where you're coming from than I did, and I appreciate that very much. I do want to ask you something, because I think when it comes to goals, you and I are very closely aligned in terms of a much more equitable society, a society where, I phrase it this way, where everyone has enough and no one has too much. Not as, not equal. We're not going to, I don't know how you could even ever have equality. But again, where everyone has enough, everyone has healthcare, everyone has a secure, safe place to live, everyone has education, everyone has a job that provides them with an opportunity to move up the ranks, commensurate with their ability, their skill set, their hard work, and everyone is paid fairly for their wages. And at the same time, when I say nobody has enough, you don't have billionaires, you don't have people who aggregate multi-generational wealth. I think we're in the same place. I think where maybe we disagree on this a little bit is whether the Democratic Party is a vehicle that can fairly be relied on to get us to that place.
I mean, I think to an extent, I know this is conversations we've had over several years. I mean, look, there's nothing I would want more. My favorite style of government is a multi-party parliament, like what you'd see in pretty much everywhere else in the world other than, the United States. The only two bad examples that don't tend to do it really well are the United Kingdom and Israel before the war, where they had like 6 elections in 2 years. Everyone else seems to have figured this out to an extent where they can at least form a government and get things done. I just think, unfortunately, being from rural areas, every time there was a new party that came up or the Green Party reached out, I was like, you just kind of looking at the reality of, okay, perfect example. Let's take the Maryland Green Party for a second. I have no idea how you feel about it. This is just kind of my experience.
I'm a supporter. I'll just throw that out there. But you go ahead and tell me what the issues are that you've seen.
Is they've kind of reached out to me, and it's like, it's not like any of them are bad people. It's just like they don't have the resources and support to win.
It feels like a dead end, right? It feels like you can't. You're not going anywhere. That's the problem. Given. And the laws in this state make it very, very hard for for third parties, which isn't obviously the fault of the Green Party, but it is the reality.
I actually believe in that sense. I think we should be able to do what happens in New York, and I believe Vermont as well, where you can run for multiple parties. Like, let's say hypothetically, and I know there's going to be someone in the Green Party that's going to say this will never happen. But again, this is a hypothetical. I'm just using a name people have let. Let's say 2026 runs around, Westmore for governor again. So he's running for re-election, and he files to run also in the Green Party. So he shows up on as a Democrat, but he wins that nomination, so he also goes in as the Green Party. Or like in New York, you have I know this happens a lot more with the Republicans, is you'll have the Republican nominee win the Republican Party nomination, and then you'll have them win the New York Conservative Party nomination.
Right. You used to have these fusion elections where you'd have a Republican running as a liberal. It was amazing. Like, I don't remember Jacob Javits. You don't remember. I remember Jacob Javits from the 70s, 60s, 70s. He ran as a Republican and also on the Liberal Party banner, which was the strangest thing to me because he wasn't a liberal. I mean, he just wasn't. But and I think Ed Koch sometimes ran as a Democrat and conservative. I may be wrong about that. So it's really kind of strange. Jared, we're at the end of the hour, so I want to just give you one final wrap up. Then we'll have the outro music. And again, thank you so much for being part of the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And for folks watching at home, if you want to learn more information or continue this conversation, please feel free to look up the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus on all social media.
And YouTube. Just let me say that's a national, you guys do work nationally. Yes, you're focused, you're locally, but even if you're not in even in Maryland, let alone the Eastern Shore, you may find some common ground with Lower Shore in terms of issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we welcome everyone, no matter where they're from. And again, Hal, I want to thank you for this opportunity. This has been fantastic. I can't wait to share around the link this afternoon to some folks on the shore.
I know you got to run, man. You take care, Jared. Always great to catch up with you. Have a great holiday season. I know our holiday is done, Hanukkah, but I still enjoy the Christmas season, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, thank you, Hal. You as well.